In this demo, I'm going to feature some devices that include automatic operation. And by automatic operation, I mean a device that, although your control logic can turn it on and off, once it's turned on, it pretty much does its own thing until it's turned off again. And one example would be like a crossing flasher, which when you turn it on, it alternates back and forth between two outputs. That's the most obvious example. In fact, I'm not even going to show that example because that's included here, but I have some others I want to demonstrate beforehand. For this demo, I'm going to use configuration number 3. And the first item I want to show here is a traffic light. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select traffic light. I'm going to call this traffic light number 1. And I have 3 types of traffic lights available, depending on how they're wired. One with 3 outputs, which would be for a single headed light with a red, red, green, and yellow. A 4 output traffic light has 6 lights, but the green and the red are cross-connected so that when one turns red, the other one turns green. So there's only 4 outputs required. And a 6 output light actually has 6 individual outputs for a signal that faces in 2 directions and has individual wiring to all 6 of the outputs. I'm going to select that particular type for this demo, and I'm going to put it on card number 1 and position number 1, and keeping in mind this uses up 6 outputs. The other thing I need to do is set the cycle time. And for this demo, I'm just going to set the cycle time to 10 seconds so that it doesn't take too long to see the actual operation. A regular traffic light might be longer than that, but for this demo, I'll set it for 10 seconds. And I'm going to save that device, and there it is. And I'm going to create another type of device, something you might see on a movie theater called a chase light. Chase light is basically, and the way I have it defined, is always a set of 4 outputs, and they follow a pattern where they just rotate across the 4 outputs. There's a selection here of 3 different types of chase lights, and the selection really means how many of the lights are lit at any one time. So I can have a pattern where only 1 light at a time is lit and it rotates, or 2 at a time are lit, and the 2 would be 2 on and 2 off, and that rotates. Or I have 3 on and 1 off, and again, in each case they rotate. So I'm going to pick the single light chase light because it's easier to see. And I'm going to put it on card 1, but over in position 9, which is the bank of outputs on the right-hand side of the card. And here, the step time is in hundredths of a second. I happen to have 10 in here. I'm going to leave 10 in there. So you're going to see the pattern shift in every 10 100ths or every 10th of a second when the thing is actually running. So I'm going to save that device. The third type of device I want to show is called a strobe light. Basically, it's a light that blinks, but it flashes on for a very short period of time, every interval. So the way this is actually implemented here is as an indicator light. And again, I'm going to call device number 1. And instead of a panel light, I'm going to pick strobe light for this one. And I'm going to put that in position 8 on our card, which is the right-hand light in the first bank of outputs. And the interval here again is in hundredths of a second. So I'm going to have this operating so that it strobes on once a second. So I'm going to put 100 in here. 100 hundredths, of course, gives me a 1 second interval. and I'm going to save that device. And the fourth one I'm going to do is what's called a lighting group or lighting control. And there's a number of different types of lighting controls. Again, I'm going to call this lighting control number 1. And there's various subgroups within lighting control. One is simply turns the group on and off. And let me pull this pull down. One is a timed group, which when it's triggered, it comes on for a certain amount of time and then shuts off. Another is a random group. A random group basically is there's a time interval and it randomly turns itself on and off at various points in time, depending on what the random time is set to. There's another one where the group is like a on-off group, except when you turn it on, it fades up or fades off when you turn it off. And then there's one called a random individual group, which is a group of lights where when it's activated, the lights come on at random, and they also turn on and off randomly at random intervals. And that's the one I'm going to use for this demo. So I'm going to say I'm going to have a random individual group here. I'm going to put it on card 1, and I'm going to put it over in position 13 on the card, which is like on the right-hand side. And I'm going to specify that there are 4 outputs. Our lighting group can have any number of outputs up to the capacity of the card or the space available on the card. In this case, I'm going to use 4 outputs, so this will be in position 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the card. And I'm going to set the time interval here for, let's say, 6 seconds. And that means this randomness that occurs with the lights will cause them to change on average about every 6 seconds. And I say on average because the interval itself is randomized also, but it's randomized around 6 seconds. And I'm going to add that group. The next thing I need to do is come up with a way of turning these various devices on and off. And to do that, I'm actually going to use a timer. And I'm going to select timer here from my list of devices. Let's call it timer number 1 again. Oops. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a timer that runs at startup. And what that means is when the device powers up, this timer will run, and it'll run till its time expires, and then it'll stop. But what I will do is when the timer runs, I will use that to activate all the devices, and you'll see that in a little bit when I show you how I'm going to set up the logic for this. So I'm going to set up a startup timer. It'll run at startup. And I'll just run it for 2 seconds because that'll be plenty of time to get everything initiated. One thing about timers, they have 3 states. They can be stopped, they can be running, or they can be expired. And when you start a timer, it'll go in the running state. It'll run until its interval elapses, and then it will go to the expired state. And after 1 second in the expired state, it'll go to the stop state, which is basically as if it had not been activated at all. And there are options for to trigger it over again or to have it repeatedly trigger itself if you'd like to do that too. Now I want to create the logic to operate these items. So the first thing I'll do, I'm going to start with the traffic light. I'm going to pick traffic light as my device, device number 1, because there is only one traffic light. And I'm not going to set a default. I'm going to say the default is no change. And what will happen is I will use my startup timer to get this traffic light turned on. and there will be no logic to turn it off. So basically, I will start it, it'll run, and it'll run forever until the power is shut off. Now you can, if you want, control it with some other logic if you want to turn it on and off. And I'll show you another possible option in a minute here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when timer number 1 is running, I'm going to set this traffic light on. And I'm going to add that logic line. Oh, timer number 1 has not been defined. No wonder, because I didn't save my timer. Okay, let's try again. When timer number 1 is running, this will be on. Add that logic line. Okay, so that's the logic for the traffic light. So I'm going to save that. What will happen, let me look at one, let me show you one other thing. Another possible state for a traffic light is flashing. And what this does is it just has one of the lights on the traffic light blink, and it depends on which type of light it is. It may be a yellow one, or it may be a red one, or it may be, in the case of a 6 light, it'll be a yellow in one direction and a red in the other direction. But for now, we're just going to deal with on. So that sets up the traffic light, and it will start running when our timer kicks on, and it'll keep running forever. I'm going to do the same thing with the other items here. So I'm going to get the chase light brought up here, number 1. Again, I'm going to say there's no change in terms of a default, so there is no default. And again, I'm going to say when timer number 1 is running, this chase light will be on. And you see there's also a pause state if you want to stop it in mid-operation. But normally it'll either be dark or it'll be on. So I'm going to add that logic line. I'm going to do the same thing for our indicator strobe light. So I'm going to pick indicator number. Okay, I got to go back and correct my indicator because apparently I didn't save it. So indicator number 1, panel light, type is actually strobe light, interval 100, and save that delay. And it says it was added, so apparently I forgot to save it before. Easy enough to do. Okay, now I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to pick indicator light again, and now it should populate this with indicator number 1. And again, I'm going to say there is no default. And again, I'm going to say when timer number 1 is running, this will be on, and save that logic. The strobe light, by the way, is something you would use maybe on a water tower or a TV tower as a flashing warning light kind of a thing. And the fourth item we're going to do is our random light group. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pick lighting control number 1. Again, no change, no default. And again, when timer 1 is running, I'm going to set this light group to active and add that logic line and save that. And I'm going to save configuration 3 here. And that's it. Now what you should see when I pan over with the camera to the actual board is as soon as it powers up, or as soon as I click run, it will, all 4 of these items will start running all simultaneously, and you'll see them running. Okay, before we can run this demo, we have to download it to the card. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to first of all stop the card, so it's not operating. Can't do a download while it's running. I'm going to select configuration number 3, and I'm going to click download. And you can see up above a bunch of messages popped up, and it says configuration download complete. And now that it's downloaded, I can click run, and all these items started running on the card. I'm going to now change to the camera view. I'm going to stop the card at this point. I'm going to switch over to the camera view so you can see when I click run what happens. Okay, so we're looking at our S3 card with the indicator lights plugged in at the top. And you won't be able to see it, but I'm going to go over to the computer here, and I'm going to click run this configuration number 3 that we created, and you're going to see a bunch of things light up. And here you go. Now, let me point out a few things here. The first 6 lights on the left here are our traffic light. And if you watch it carefully, you'll see it just went to yellow in that direction. Now it's green in the other direction and red in the opposing direction. And after about 10 seconds being in green, it'll go yellow, and then it'll go green and red in the opposite direction. The other thing, the next thing over here in position 8 is our strobe light that we set up. You can see it flashing at a 1 second interval, which is what we specified when we built it. The next 4 lights over is the chase light, and it's running repeatedly that pattern every 1/10 of a second, just scrolling across like you would have on a movie marquee or some other such display. And the last 4 lights, you have to watch them a little bit. They are really just going on and off at random, and approximately every 6 seconds or so, and again the interval itself is even random, these lights will light up. So if you have a nighttime scene in a town and you want lights in houses going on and off kind of randomly all during the evening, you can set that up and set whatever interval you'd like them to change, and you can basically have any number of lights in a group and operate them in this kind of random manner. So these are examples of items that are basically self-operating. There's no logic that you have to create other than to start them, and they will just continue until you stop them from running.